turn this on, and then we'll go ahead and get started. We do have 5 o'clock service, but I tried to create enough space to take our time working through the slides, and if you have any questions, you can feel free to ask. I don't intend for this to just be lecture style by any stretch of the imagination. So if something piques your interest and you want to ask me a question, just ask. I'll repeat the question in my mic so that when it's recorded, if anybody goes back and listens to it, they understand what the question is. So why don't I pray before we go ahead and start? Father, as we come into your presence today to hear about the work that you are doing in Egypt through the Synod of the Nile, I pray that our time together would be a blessing. I also pray for anybody that would listen to this online, that it would be a blessing to them. I know many people in our Presbyterian denomination will probably watch this as well, and on the Fraternal Relations Committee. We pray that you continue to spread your gospel through the Synod of the Nile, and coming this summer at General Assembly, that the relationship would become official. Help us to learn this evening, especially from brothers and sisters in Christ who St. Mark brought them the gospel in the year 60. So they have been Christians. There's been a Christian witness in Egypt since the beginning. So Lord, I pray that you bless them and that you would bless us tonight. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Okay, so just a raise of hands, who has heard of Synod of the Nile before? Yeah? So I know Diana has visited them before. Have you heard of it? Okay. Did you hear about them, Marv, before me? Okay. 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 So, so Synod of the Nile is basically shorthand for the Presbyterian Church in Egypt. And they also have a name that's more broad, like the Evangelical Church in Egypt. And I could be wrong, but I think that they go by that so they could probably fundraise from a broader base so they don't just get funds from, say, Presbyterians. Is everybody kind of on page there? At least that's what I think. So they have been in Egypt since the year 1850, and that decade. If anybody knows Presbyterian history quite well, the United Presbyterian Church, which merged with the Peace USA, gosh, I don't even know the year off the top of my head, but the United Presbyterian Church started the mission in Egypt in the 1850s. And I was always told, the United Presbyterian Church, that was kind of like the Scots-Irish ethnic Presbyterians, or at least where I grew up in southwestern PA, they were known for being very zealous about missions. And so they started a mission in Egypt in the 1850s, which has been going really, really strong till about right now. So when I got asked to go, I chaired it's not really that fancy, but I chaired the Fraternal Relations Committee, which is a national committee with the denomination. So we have General Assembly, Presbytery, and then your local session. Those are the governing bodies. The Fraternal Relations Committee is tasked with finding or being approached by other Reformed and Presbyterian churches throughout the world and doing mission with them, essentially. Or the way I like to communicate it is friendship, because sometimes the American church has been a little bit like, this is the way that you're going to do it, and then our partners overseas get annoyed with us. So I like the word friendship, because friendship implies a reciprocity. We have certain gifts as the church, or in this case, the Evangelical Presbyterian Church, and our brothers and sisters in Christ have gifts that they can share with us in the Synod of the Nile, or like the Mexican Presbyterian Church, which I know. Does everybody remember Pedro and Olivia that came my first year? Yeah, he came, and I came into friendship with them through the Fraternal Relations Committee. That's essentially how we got to know each other. Any questions so far? Yeah, so we have, just so you guys know, we have a relationship with the church in Argentina, the Presbyterian Church in Argentina, which actually used to be a part of our denomination, which is kind of interesting. We have the Presbyterian Church in Brazil. We have the Presbyterian Church in Mexico, which is I think double the size of the Peace USA. It is the largest Presbyterian denomination in the whole world. I don't know if you knew that, in Mexico. Yeah, we have a relationship with a reformed body in France, which is new. It's called UniPref. I actually sat with a kid on an airplane back from France to Salt Lake. I think the Mormons got her first, but I was talking up UniPref and being like, you need to go visit one of these churches. And then I gave her my email address and said, when you go, write me back and tell me what it's like. So I have no idea if she'll take me up on that. We have one in Ireland. And then domestically, we have relationships with the Christian Reformed Church, which is Dutch, ECO, Evangelical Covenant Order. They're similar to the EPC, and the Presbyterian Church in America. We have relationships with all of them. But I like, as I've been telling people, I like to go to the global south, south of the equator, because Christians know how to party and have fun in those countries. Everybody else is so serious. So I don't mind going out to dinner at like midnight, like I did one night. That's fine with me. We used to do that in Mexico all the time. So you can see on my first slide, I'm going to try to show as many pictures as I can. This was our team. There was 3 of us, so I was the representative as the chair of the committee, which is sort of funny when you're in a culture where they really respect older people. They kept thinking Whitney, who's in black back there, he's a retired EPC pastor. They kept deferring to him, which is totally fine. I totally get it. But I would occasionally speak up and I'm like, I'm actually the chair of the committee. And they would just kind of smile. They're like, but you're so young. I'm like, well, we need somebody to run the committee. So Whitney, he pastored at First Pres Baton Rouge in Louisiana for a long time, over 20 years. He was great. He's like super extroverted. He's pure New Orleans, and he's just a lot of fun. So he allowed me to lighten up some on my trip and have fun. And then the other gentleman there, I'm not going to share his name because he's a world outreach worker, and I just want to keep that on the down low with security and everything. But we do have a world outreach worker on the ground in Cairo. I got to spend a lot of time with him. And if the EPC and Synod of the Nile relationship is going to work well, that particular person is going to play a big role. In fact, I have a call with him next week. So the 3 of us spent a ton of time together. It was like 12 hours every single day. They had us do a ton of stuff. Any questions so far? And that's the pyramids behind us. That's the panoramic view. That's where I saw the Gen Alpha kids and Gen Z doing this thing with their fingers where they flew all the way over there to probably get pictures for Instagram. And they would get to the panoramic thing and they would stick their fingers out like this and smile or take a selfie and do it. And that must be like a trend online. I'm not going to lie, I was slightly embarrassed by our culture. I wanted to ask the kids, I wanted to shake them and be like, did you literally spend $1,700 and get on a plane to take a picture for Instagram? And they probably would have said, yes. So, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so history of the Synod of the Nile. So another name that they go by is the Evangelical Church of Egypt. That's a Coptic cross there. So it's founded in the 1850s again by the United Presbyterian Church. I never knew this until I got asked to go on this trip, but Egypt is 10% Christian. It has a pretty high percentage for they're kind of Middle East, but they're also North African. But for those countries that are kind of bunched together over there, 10% is pretty high. In fact, one night we were talking to one of our tour guides. His name was Robin, and he was telling me that Egypt was, before the Islamic conquest, a Christian country. And specifically, the Copts, who were reached by basically the apostles very early, were all embraced the gospel. And he was telling me and the team that there's a difference between an Egyptian and an Arab. He's like, Egyptians do not have colored eyes. They do not have blonde hair. They don't look Syrian. He said, Egyptians have very dark features. And he explained it in a really good way, and I could see that there was a difference between the ethnic Copt people, who are Egyptians, versus kind of your just Arab population. They actually distinctly look different. It's much like in the United States, if you had anybody in your family who's Greek Orthodox. Like Greek Orthodox, it's a faith, but it's also like an ethnic thing as well. So very, very interesting. Did anybody realize that Egypt is 10% Christian? No? Yeah. Yeah, Rick knew. Okay, yeah. Yeah, Diana knew, but she's cheating because she's been there before. So Coptic Christian community is their is their bedrock. Although they do some church planting with, like, I didn't realize this until I was there. Tons of people from Africa end up in Egypt. Like the one night, the night before we left, we're kind of hanging out, and there's a big South Sudanese church that was worshiping on that Sunday night. And I didn't know a whole lot about Sudan, but they had a civil war, and a lot of the South Sudanese are making their way to Egypt to be safe, and a lot of them are becoming Christians because my understanding is the Egyptian government doesn't care about them. So we're on an elevator, and a lady's like, "I'm a Christian, and I was just baptized." And we're like, "Wow, that's really awesome." So, and I didn't realize that South Sudanese are like super tall. Like most women were my height, and the guys were like 6'5", 6'6". And I asked the woman, "Are you all this tall, South Sudanese?" And she's like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "Well, you're my height, and I'm considered a big guy in the United States." So, yeah. Okay, so according to church tradition, the Apostle Mark reached the Coptic community with the gospel around 60 AD. So they have been a reached people group for a very, very long time. In fact, I earned some street credibility with them when I was talking to a group of pastors about all the church fathers that were from Egypt. And they said, "Well, next time you come, we're taking you to Alexandria." So I was like, "Sure." Okay, so here, what I'm going to do is, like, the institution of the Synod of the Nile is incredibly impressive. They have all these different branches and emphases that they do. They're really a well-oiled machine. And they have, like, all these different groups, and they took us through each group. And what I'm trying to do in my presentation tonight is prioritize which ones that I think align with the EPC, where we could do partnership in the future or in the local church level, and kind of work my way down. So one thing that we're trying to really emphasize in the EPC is church planting. So we've went from a denomination that planted, I think, like 5 churches 20 years ago, and now we have about 60-ish going on in the whole denomination. So we have a real strong emphasis, and we're trying to raise awareness. I was even trying to network this past week to see if we could get something going in Idaho. But church planting is a huge emphasis in our denomination. And probably the number one thing that impressed me the most on my trip was the zeal for church planting in Egypt. They're doing a lot of great work. So I've told some of you this already, but President Sisi, for whatever reason, is very favorable to Christians in Egypt, and he's allowing them to plant churches. Now, their style of planting is a little bit different than ours. They kind of do like, if you build it, they will come type of model, where we kind of we do it the other way around. You have to gain a critical mass of people, get a giving base, then build a building. But what's essentially going on is the government gives land to the Christians in these new communities, which are sprouting up, and they have 3 years to build a church on top of that lot that they give them. So the denomination has a huge push towards building church structures. They're just building them all over the place. We saw 6 church plants total just in Cairo. I don't know off the top of my head how many church plants were going on throughout the entire country, but there's a lot. I would say, without a doubt, that was the most impressive work that was being done when we toured everything. Yes, go ahead, Marv.
How does the Muslim community react to all those church plants, those Christian church?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So they are not legally allowed to evangelize Muslims. Now, that doesn't mean that people don't convert, but they have to be really, really careful about how they engage evangelism. In fact, I can tell you something offline that is really interesting, just because this is going to get recorded, and you never know with AI and all this stuff. But that's essentially what happens. But if I had to guess, the majority of Christians in Egypt are from the Orthodox community, and a lot of the people that I met grew up Orthodox and became Presbyterian. So I think what happens is the Presbyterian church kind of serves as like a renewal church to all Christians in Egypt. Does that make sense? Yeah. So which makes sense, because has anybody been in an Orthodox service before? Yeah, the liturgy is really interesting. For a Western, they're Eastern. and it's not as like biblical as a Protestant service. So it's quite a bit different. Larry.
Where do you get the pastors to fill all those churches?
Yeah, so the question is, where do you get all the pastors? And the answer is they have a vast way to raise up children in the life of the church, and they have their own seminary, which is part of my presentation. So yeah, they do a pretty good job at recruiting from within. So that's a great question. So hopefully, okay, so can we turn up the volume and play this gentleman's video? So before we click play, they rolled out so most Christians in Egypt, they go to service on Friday nights. Friday night is their big service, which I didn't know this, because you work Sunday through Thursday, and then your weekend is Friday, Saturday. So if you're like under 50 years old and you're working and you have kids, you go to church on Friday night. So we went to this church service, and I had the pleasure of preaching, and I thought it was going to be like 70 people. It was like 600. It was crazy. And so I preached in front of all these people, which I've done before. Like our home church is quite large, like 500 people in attendance when Sarah and I went there. So I did that a few times. I wasn't scared, but I was caught off guard. And then they brought their most famous musician in the whole denomination to play and lead music. Now I have a video for you to listen to it. He is really great. The video doesn't do justice to how good his music is, but it's kind of like this ancient Coptic hymns from like the 2nd, 3rd, 4th century, and he basically modernizes them and plays them. There's a lot of repetition. It sounds a lot like Hebrew, if you're familiar with like Hebrew choirs, but it was just absolutely beautiful. I did not understand what he was saying at all, but when I got up to preach, I said, well, in heaven, I don't think we're going to be singing in English. I think we'll be singing in Arabic, and maybe I'll be able to understand all of you guys. So if we could go ahead and play the video. Hopefully it works. You can also see how many young people are behind us. So you kind of get a taste. I don't think my video does quite justice to how great it is in person. And actually his recorded music, they need to get him into like an American studio and get him to have like a really finely edited album, because he's actually quite incredible. So, oops, okay, let's go to next slide. Yeah, well, I was gonna say, forget the pastors at GA, we'll just bring the musician and have him play at General Assembly. He was that good. Okay, so now I'm just kind of going through the slides and giving you pictures of the different church plants so you get a feel of it. So this first one is kind of in a newer part of town called Obor City. And this is kind of a new development, and they were so excited to show us this. This plot of land is where a church will be in the next 3 years. So they're just starting to break ground. We all had to go to the bathroom really bad because it was outside. It was like an hour and a half out of where we were staying, and we drank like 2 bottles of water each. So we ran out of the car and we're like, toilet, toilet. And we were like, we can't see it too far. So we literally saw that. We just saw that for about 15 seconds before they rushed and found us a bathroom. And I'll tell you what, the hospitality of Egyptians was great, because when we said we had to go to the bathroom, they started driving like 100 miles an hour to find the next bathroom. So it was pretty funny. I've never had to go so bad in my life. It was kind of crazy. Okay, so that church that I just showed you where they were playing music, that's in a basement basically, and it fits a couple hundred people. This is the church upstairs. So they're finalizing the actual church structure. One thing I didn't realize is I guess it's really hard to get wood into Egypt. They don't really have they don't have any forest. It's basically desert. And so they build their churches out of like marble and granite and all these beautiful stones because that's what they have. So the buildings themselves are pretty impressive. That's our team, by the way. They do, yeah. A lot of their building structures are built out of concrete. I have a good friend from Turkey, and he said that kind of region of the whole world, that's kind of what they do, and they build mostly apartments. There's just apartments all over the place. Okay, so this is another church plant that's going up. So this is in New Cairo, it's called, and what you don't see in that picture is this is built kind of in the mausoleums where they bury the dead. So they're actually it's behind this way and then over this way. So they're building a church. They're going to knock down that wall in the back, and then they're going to build wall structures around to make it kind of its own thing. But that church is actually supposed to be done here in like the next 6 months. So like I said, they're just a machine. They're just like, they're getting through a lot of stuff. Yeah.
Are the graveyards near the church?
They are. They're right behind. Did I skip a slide?
You did.
Oh, I did? Okay. All right. Go back. Next one. That one. Okay. So this one just was completed recently. This is in New Cairo as well. I preached there on Sunday morning. I really enjoyed that church because it looked like our church, but in Egypt, about 70 to 80 people. It was mostly an older congregation. I think everybody was working and the kids were at school. But I've really enjoyed preaching there. And one thing that I don't have in the photos is they had a guard with an AK-47 around from the military outside of the church, and I waited till he turned the other way. In America, I probably would have asked him to take a picture with him, but I didn't want to make him mad. So I waited till he turned around and I snapped a picture. So if you want to see that, I have it on my phone. I'm like, I don't want to get in trouble with the law. Yeah. So pretty impressive, just like in Idaho, we have a lot of guns and so forth and so on, but they had a AK-47. Yes, Karen?
Do they import the pews?
They do, actually. Yep, that's a great question. Yep, and it looks kind of like your typical Presbyterian or just Protestant church in America. So.
What did she say, import the what?
The pews. Yeah, they import the pews from, I think, Europe. They import a lot of stuff from Europe.
Because they were wood.
Yeah, even the plugs, like the plugs are different in Europe and Egypt, and I had to get an adapter because I was like, you guys don't have any plugs? So they started looking at me. And then somebody from my team's like, no, they're European plugs. And I'm like, I didn't know such a thing existed. So I was like, who builds an apartment without any plugs? I'm just the dumb American, right? Oh, the other thing I should mention is their sermons are quite long. So when I preached in front of all those people on Friday night, when somebody tells me to stick to 15 minutes, I stick to 15 minutes. The clerk of our presbytery, Ed Cummings, is like, I love you, Doug, because when I give you a time limit, you abide by it. Well, I apparently preached too short on Friday, and they're used to really long sermons. And so I preached a sermon, and the stated clerk of the Synod of the Nile, Rafat, he says to me, that was really great. And he has this really big smile on his face. You did a great job. He's like, but it was really short. And I was like, I think that's a big compliment. So I made sure when I preached on Sunday to just expand it a lot more. But when somebody gives me a time limit, I hit it.
Was the price of sand per cubic yard cheap, or did anybody ask?
I don't know, actually, but I should have brought some sand back for the kids. They just kept giving me gifts left and right. And the kids are like, this is great. We have so many souvenirs from Egypt. I'm like, well, I came back with like 15 gifts. So,
Well, me being in the concrete business for 50 to 60 years, I've been curious what the price is saying.
yeah. No, that's true. Okay, so that's church planning. I would say, just from my interpretation, that was what impressed me the most. The second thing that I really enjoyed was we took a tour of one of their most treasured schools in Cairo. So they have 30, I think they said 32 or 36 what I would call like parochial schools. So like, Roman Catholics have their whole school system that they filter kids through. It's kind of like the Presbyterian version in Egypt, and they have about 36 of them. And we visited one of their schools that's really high performing. So it's called Ramses School for Girls. They had about 360 girls. One thing that's interesting as part of their mission, they don't only, it's not just Christian girls that come. There's Muslim girls that come. In fact, some of the highest ranking officials in all of Egypt sent their kids to the Christian school system because it's that good. Like, one thing I noticed is that Egyptian Christians really punch above their weight. Like, they're really, really, really talented. I met a lady who spoke perfect English, and I'm like, where did you speak English so well? And she's like, well, I'm a professor. I was a professor at Cairo University. And she's like, I taught a little bit in America too at a college. And I'm like, well, where did you teach? And she's like, oh, it wasn't a very significant institution. And I'm like, so what was the institution? She's like, Georgetown. And I'm like, Georgetown's a really good institution. Like, I knew somebody who went there, and that's like one step below the Ivy Leagues. So anyways, she was really, but my point is that they have a lot of successful people in their denomination. Karen.
Are they boarding schools or just day schools like we send our kids to?
So the one that we saw was a day school, but I can't speak to the different parts of Egypt, and like Alexandria, or they called it Upper Egypt, but I think that's actually south of where we were, which confused me for the longest time. Yeah, great question. All right, so that was the school that we visited. Here are some pictures they have a special needs school. So that's their team there that we met. I think the lady, she was great. And then the pastor next to me on my right, he's kind of the head of the school. And then the lady in the blue suit jacket, she's kind of like the principal. Her mom actually went to the school, so she had a long history going way back. Then you can see there's a Muslim gal who special needs, and she was showing us all the different like stuff that they make and how they're trained to then go off and be able to have jobs. And they had a bunch of jars of jam. I was like, oh, I love jam. That's really cool. And they're like, well, would you like one to take home? And I was like, sure. So they brought us like a jar of jam for each person on our tour, and I brought it home. So that was really cute. So, and the gentleman in that picture, his name's Rafat. He is the clerk of the whole Synod of the Nile, kind of like the CEO, if you want to use a business analogy. So we spent a lot of time with him.
Is that the one in the suit?
What? Yeah. Yep. Okay, so the next one, Larry asked a question about how like they train pastors, and they basically, what happens is because they only have male pastors, they have female ruling elders, but only male pastors. The pastors typically go through the school system, and when they feel God's call to ministry, they then go off to the seminary. So the seminary that we toured, which is called Evangelical Theological Seminary in Cairo, was founded in 1926. It's an old historic building. They have 500 students from various denominational backgrounds, and they have over 17 countries that are represented in the seminary. So this kind of gets into how Egypt is a really important country for the Christian witness in the Middle East. They have the institutions to do the work. They've been doing it for a very long time, and a lot of pastors get trained in Egypt and then go back to the country where they're from, whether it's like Syria or Iraq. One pastor was like, we're planting churches in Iraq, and I'm going to take you there next time. And I'm like, I am not going to go to Iraq, right? I'll stick to Egypt, and that's good. So, in fact, my travel buddy's like, I wouldn't let you go to Iraq. I can go because if they kill me, I'm an old man. He's like, you got 2 little kids. I'm not going to let you go. Marv.
Doug, how long is the seminary program?
Uh,
And do you have to be a graduate
Yep.
or something else before you start?
Yeah, so it's just like our seminary. So you have to have a bachelor's degree, and then you go into if you're going to be a pastor, you have to have an MDiv just like we do. In fact, they told us how much it costs to educate one of their students that are in the MDiv, Masters of Divinity program. It's about $8,000 US. Yep, great question. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this are some of their Coptic art within the chapel, which I thought was really cool. And they gave us some pictures of these to take home. So you can't see it, well, I guess you can see it super well, but you can kind of see how they're Egyptian. There's an Egyptian portrayal of Jesus and then the 12 disciples. It's just a very distinct look that Copts have. There's one of their lecture halls. And then this was really interesting. So there was a really famous scholar that taught at the seminary for many, many decades. His name was Ken Bailey. Has anybody heard of Ken Bailey before? Okay, no? Okay. Man, Rick, you should be the one teaching here. You've heard of everybody. Yeah, so Ken Bailey, he's written a few books. One really great book he wrote called Jesus Through Middle Eastern Eyes, which I would recommend to read. The interesting thing about Ken Bailey is he's a Pittsburgh kid like myself. I mean, he's in glory with the Lord now. But they have an actual museum dedicated to him because he was a big deal in training pastors in the Middle East. And so they built this big museum to Ken Bailey. And I was trying to be like, with our tour guide, I'm like, well, I'm from Pittsburgh too. And I don't think she really cared. She was very polite, but I was like, wow, this is a really big deal. And I say that because my home church, one time I was teaching a class and I had mentioned Ken Bailey said this, and everybody in the class started laughing and smiling at me. They were like 70, 80, 90 years old. This is about a decade ago. And I'm like, why are you guys laughing? And they're like, Ken Bailey's taught this class before. And we've been writing checks to Ken Bailey for decades, and we know him really, really well. He's like a big deal. And I was like, really? I was like, well, then you shouldn't have me teach his stuff. You should just have him come back and teach the class. So this is some of the artwork that was in his museum. So this was really interesting to me and stood out. I couldn't edit the picture too well, but it's tile. And the Muslims thought this was like pre-Muslim tile that they were putting all over the place in Egypt. And it's actually Coptic Christian artwork. So the sun in the middle is a symbol for Jesus. That's a big part of Coptic Orthodox mosaics, I guess if that's the right term. The 12 stones on the outside are for the 12 disciples of Jesus. And then there's the 4 corners of the world to share the gospel and spread out. So they get a little laugh out of this because Muslims were putting this all over Egypt, and it was actually a way of telling the gospel to people. And I thought that was quite cool. So the lady was really passionate about that.
The star in the middle reminds me of the Jewish star.
Yeah, kind of a little bit. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there a Jewish synagogues in Egypt?
So I don't know. I didn't see any synagogues when I was there, but I'm sure there's a decent Jewish population that's there. Yeah, there's actually a couple that was on the plane from Paris to Cairo with me, and they didn't tell me they were Jewish, but I knew. I grew up in Pittsburgh. I had a lot of Jewish friends as a kid, and they were going there to do like a heritage tour with Moses and everything. So, yeah, but that's a good question. All right, the next one, and I was actually just emailing back and forth with the CEO of the hospital system. This is called Cairo Evangelical Hospital. So they have 2 hospitals in all of Egypt that they run. So it's right next door to the building that we stayed at, which was the headquarters. And so we got to tour that the first night. So you can see Whitney and I in the ICU. He took us on this 2-hour tour, and he was a really passionate gentleman. He's a PK, so his dad was a pastor, and he kept telling us, if it's got Christian on the hospital, it needs to be the best in the country. So he's like really passionate about this. He also was bragging about all the fundraising that they've done to get really high quality medical devices. So I hit it off really well with Joseph is his name, because my dad, a lot of what my dad sold to was these manufacturing companies of like high-end medical devices. So Joseph is the gentleman between Whitney and I. He was great. He's also the one that called it the golden age of Christianity in Egypt right now. And then the guy on the left, the younger guy, his name's Michael. He's Coptic Orthodox, and he's about my age. I got along with him really well for the 2 hours we spent with him. And an interesting thing about him is his brother moved to be a pharmacist in the United States and then became a priest in the Orthodox Church and went to a seminary that I know of. And when I said that, he smiled, and we had a lot of really great conversation with each other. So those two guys run the hospital, and we got to do a tour and meet people and everything. So it was really cool. He's coming to the United States. I was just writing back and forth with him. I don't know if he'd be interested in visiting the Pacific Northwest, so we'll see. Yeah, go ahead.
Is the hospital a full-service hospital? Do they do surgery?
They do everything. So it's like 7 floors. And he was just emailing me back and forth today, asking in the EPC if we have any doctors that would like to come in and serve for a week or two. And they're also looking for like a nurse, like a missionary nursing program where they could spend about 6 months there and work in the hospital. So if you guys know any lovely Christian people who are nurses or doctors that would like to serve, let me know, because Joseph's already asking me. He's a really passionate guy. So this is their NICU. Everybody loves babies, so I had to take a picture of the NICU. Thankfully, no children or no babies are in there right now. But he said at one time, I think they had about 6 to 8 babies there. So they have a full service NICU that they can use. Oh, another interesting thing about the hospital, if any pastors have any medical problems, the pastors can go there for free and their families, so which is kind of neat. There we go. Okay, so kind of the last couple of my slides is the tourism that we experienced. I will say that like when I went over to Egypt, I wanted to go over to do work and get to know what the Lord is doing there. And the tourism was really just the icing on top. If we had not done it, I would have been fine too. I like going to church. I'm a pastor, so I like going to church, right? But I did want to share some pictures of the tourism. So this was called St. Simon the Tanner's Monastery. We had the option to pick this one or go shopping. And Sarah was like, well, why didn't you go shopping? And I was like, it's a bunch of guys. I call Sarah Lovey. I'm like, why would I go shopping? And she's like, good point. I was like, I want to see like old historic churches. That's what I love to do. And I will say between the monastery and the pyramids, I like the monastery more. I thought it was just more interesting. Yeah, so just to kind of give some background on these things. So on your left, you can see a carving. They literally carved this into the mountain. There's a Polish guy that I don't know if they've hired or he just lives in Cairo, and he's like literally carving into the side of the mountain the whole story of like the Bible and God's story of redemption. I thought that was the coolest one. So that's the verse, "He is not here. He has risen just as he said," and it has that giant stone rolled back. Super, super impressive, but he must have had like 50 or 60 of them literally carved into the mountain.
Is that a church?
It is. Yeah, you're talking about down there?
Yeah, where the
Yeah.
stone is that church?
Yeah, so it's outside of a town called Garbage City, which is where a lot of low-income people live, and they collect all the trash in Cairo and process it, and they get to live there for free and make money off of their recycling, if I understood them correctly. And it's a Christian village. There's literally a checkpoint when you go in, and they built this massive church literally in the side of the mountain. They carved it out. And it's built, so in the Orthodox tradition, you usually build a church on top of a saint, or it's dedicated to a saint. So this one is dedicated to St. Simon the Tanner. He's a poor man who prayed that God would move this mountain, and they believe that God did move the mountain. And in order to dedicate it, they built this giant monastery. So I got Zoe and Ezra some keychains of Simon the Tanner. I should have brought them tonight to show you guys. And I didn't realize how cheap stuff was in Egypt. I could have probably bought like 100 of them for like $5. So I guess you live and you learn. If I go back in the future, I'll make sure to know all this stuff, right? Is this my first rodeo? That's the entrance into a church. And just to kind of give you guys a picture of the scale of this church, that church fits outside 20,000 people for Mass. So literally the whole town, if I understood correctly, can go to church there. It's super impressive. Any questions? Did you go to that church, Diane? Did you think it? Yep. Yeah, it's super impressive.
Are those pews outside on the right hand of that last picture?
They are, yeah. Yep, those are paintings. That's a painting of Saint Simon the Tanner. I could show, if you guys want to see closer up, I have way more pictures on my phone. I could show you those as well, but I had to kind of pick and choose which ones. We went to a Coptic Orthodox service in the Cave Church, so there's another church there for smaller services, and we went. They just sing a lot, so we were like an hour into singing, and I was like, where's the preacher? And I started pacing back and forth in the back, and they turned to me like, are you ready to go? And I was like, yeah. I'm tired. That was our second day, so jet lag was really bad. Okay, so we went to the pyramids and the Grand Egyptian Museum. So I saw King Tut's, like, I don't know what you call that, head covering thing that he was buried. Everybody was going to get a picture next to that one. There's the Sphinx, which is, they think, they're like 90% sure King Khufu is his name, the pharaoh. The second pyramid, the one in the middle. And then the one on the right, when you walk in, this is a brand new museum they built. I think it just opened up a year or two ago. It used to be downtown, but now it's in Giza. And that's Ramses II, which some scholars argue was the pharaoh when Moses battled Pharaoh. That's Pharaoh in the Exodus account.
Did they say what dynasty he was?
I actually don't know. I was so tired that day because that was Saturday. Just to kind of give you, church ended at midnight basically, and then they said, "Do you guys want to grab dinner?" And we're like, "Sure." We're not going to be rude to our guests, so we went to go have dinner, and we finished up at 2:30 in the morning and went to bed at 3. We had to be up at 9 o'clock the next day to go to the pyramids because they sell it based on time slot. Because they have 10,000 people a day that visit the pyramids. That's how busy it is. Yeah, Marv?
When we were there, they said Ramses II was known as the Chiseler King
Okay,
because all the pharaohs before him that were building this monument city,
yep,
he had their names chiseled out and his name chiseled in.
that makes sense.
So he was the Chiseler King.
Yeah. The guy that gave us the tour, he did a really good job. He knew his history quite well. So, yeah, so that's a great question. I was so tired that day that I was just trying to take pictures and relax a little bit. No, it wasn't hot yet. And the Sphinx is actually smaller than you would think in person. It's not as big as the pictures make it look.
Pulled a chisel out of your pocket and knocked you off at souvenir, would you still be there in jail?
Probably, yeah. Although I was told that there was a viral video last year. There's a lot of stray dogs in Egypt, much like Mexico. And a stray dog went all the way to the top of the pyramid, walked up and scaled up it, and then came down, which I think is pretty funny. So,
And he's in jail too.
yeah, probably. They need to do something about the dogs there. They're out of control.
Walk up the side of the pyramid?
I didn't even, yeah, we walked up like really close.
No.
Oh.
There are steps going up.
Oh, no, I think you had to pay extra for that. Yeah.
Have cats, domestic cats over there? They must be happy with the litter box.
Oh, yeah, well, I just saw a lot of dogs and was embarrassed when the Americans are like feeding the dogs out their like scraps, and I'm like, a lot of dogs have rabies there. When our global worker got bit by a stray dog, he had to go get a rabies shot. So, these Americans love dogs, great, but sometimes they need to go to shelters too, because they can be dangerous. So I could give you all kinds of funny stories about stray dogs in Mexico. All the dogs look similar in Egypt, and when I lived in Mexico, we'd be waiting in the jungle to get a cab, and all of a sudden, out of the jungle would pop a Chihuahua, a Great Dane, and like a German Shepherd. And they run in packs, and I'm like, yeah, they're really dangerous for little kids or like elderly because they've killed people before.
Do they have Taco Bells there?
They did have a Taco Bell there. Rafat told me the Mexicans have moved there, and their food is really popular. So I'm like, you haven't had real Mexican food yet. I'll introduce you in Colorado when we go to General Assembly. So the food, the two dishes that I like the most, everything I had there was great. This dish on your left is called kosheri, and that's the Egyptian national dish. It's kind of like the working man's dish that everybody eats. We thought we ate cheap. There was 3 of us, and we ate for like $17 plus coffee and drink and the dish. The guy that lives there said that you can eat that dish for 30 cents and fill you up for like dinner. He's like, oh, that's really expensive. We're like, what are you talking about? He's like, I should have been able to pay for lunch for $1. And we thought we got a steal for $17, but he's like, that's really expensive here. It was delicious. And then that place over there is a shawarma wrap. So has everybody had shawarma before? I'm usually not personally the biggest fan of it in the States. And so we had to catch our flight at 2 o'clock in the morning. We finished up, and they, of course, wanted to give us dinner. So Rafat was like, we're going to send your cab driver, Shadi, when you're going to the airport to pick up shawarma. We were afraid we were going to like get stuck in traffic and not get to the airport. So we told Shadi, well, you don't have to like get the shawarma, but you know, when the boss tells you to do something, you do it. And anyway, so Shadi was really kind, and we waited. And I honestly wasn't that hungry. But he handed it to us, and I was like, well, it's going to be really rude if we don't eat any of this food. And so I bit into it, and it was the best food I had all week. It was just incredible. A lot of the shawarma I've had in the States is really dry, but this was like super moist, just full pack of flavors. It was like they have lamb, they have beef. They cut it off the spit there. And they basically put it into bread and then throw some vegetables, and then you have like almost like a garlic sauce that you dip it in and eat it. It's literally fantastic. So I loved it. I don't think it probably cost a lot of money to do the authentic version in the United States, so that's probably why it's not that good here, in my opinion. Okay, so conclusion from the trip. So the trip, I went out of obligation. I was asked to do it, and I was like, well, it should be kind of a once-in-a-lifetime trip that I'd go on and have fun. And I went over and just had a blast, and if the opportunity came, I'd love to go back. In fact, they invited me to some prayer thing that they're putting on in Alexandria next year. I'm like, well, if the General Assembly pays for it, I'll go. Because it's not cheap to get over there, right? But if it's official church work, that's why we have funds. So right now, we're not in an official friendship with them. So part of my task as the chair is in June this year at the General Assembly, they're coming over. They're having 2, maybe 3 guys, and we're going to get everything square, and the General Assembly is going to vote to ratify the fraternal relationship. So if you could be praying for that, that would be great. I'm sure it will go smooth. A lot of people in our denomination are well aware of the work that Synod of the Nile has done for decades. Or like, I just had lunch with Dave Moody. You guys all know Dave Moody from Caldwell. He said that his parents had supported their work, and I think Dave's kids have been there before. Anyways, a lot of people know the mission of Synod of the Nile and respect it and the great work. Now I put this map up there because you can see all the nations that are really, really hard to reach for us as Americans. And one of the things that I think is incredibly important for our relationship being established with Synod of the Nile is we can support brothers and sisters in Christ that can get into places that we can't get into as Americans. It's just impossible. We can't get the visa. We don't speak the language as well as they do if they grew up with it. And they can go plant churches in other places. So it's really great to have a relationship with them and to support them financially with our prayers, so forth and so on. Actually, one of the pastors I got to know, his name's Samuel. He's kind of the number two over their church planning. He went after we spent some time with him. The week after, he went to Dubai, and he got stuck there because of all the shooting back and forth. So he actually texted me for prayer. He got back to Egypt, so he's safe. But he was there at a church planning conference and how to do church planning, if I understood him correctly, in the Gulf nations, which is really hard.
Did you do anything on the Nile?
We did not. We just drove over it whenever we went to Giza to go to the pyramids. So I did see it though. It's quite big. I don't know what it looked like when Moses was there, but it was kind of neat to cross over a river where so much history happened.
Came down the Nile as part of our tour, and you could see where the sand started on either side. You had about maybe a half mile to a mile
Yeah.
of fertile land. and
Yep.
it was sand.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. No, it's totally true. Yeah. So that concludes my my presentation for you guys. Do you have questions?
Where are the pyramids on that map?
So that's a great question. So you can't really see the Nile there, but the Nile almost runs pretty much in the middle, and the pyramids are in Giza. So it's essentially two cities, or at least that's how I view it. On one side of the Nile, on the west, is Giza, and on the east is Cairo. So they're on the left side of Egypt. Yeah, and my understanding, if I remember correctly, is that east was considered the land of the living on the other side of the Nile, and then if you go west, that's the land of the dead. So that's where they had all their necropolis and everything set up. So
Is that because it's all sand?
did I go in a pyramid? Oh, sorry, one question. Go ahead.
Was that because it was all sand, they call it the land of the dead?
No, I think it's because of the way the sun sets. So it's a very symbolic way of understanding. So the sun sets or rises in the east, sets in the west. So death is on the west. So you don't want to end up on the west, I guess. Yeah, go ahead, Marv.
Did you go in the step pyramid?
I did not, no. Yeah, maybe next time if I visit. So, yeah. Did you go into the inside? Okay.
Karen did not.
Okay. Was it pretty claustrophobic?
It is for her.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so
It's like going in the tunnels in Vietnam.
yeah. So honestly was so impressed with the work. I would love for us to host. Just a lot of the pastors, I didn't know this. A lot of Arabic speaking church plants go on in Seattle. I guess there's a heavy Arabic speaking population there, and also Los Angeles. So a lot of the pastors and the clerk of the Synod of the Nile go to Los Angeles and Seattle, and I told him, I already sent him a message and said, if you're in those towns, let me know, because the Idaho churches could work, like a plane ticket's pretty cheap to come up here. We'll figure it out. Like, I'd love to get them to come up and speak for us and talk about the ministry there, because it's my perspective, but it would be kind of cool to have the actual clerk or a pastor give a sermon and so forth. Yeah.
There are Arabic churches all over the country because Menlo Park Press, we put on a conference where Brother Andrew spoke.
Okay.
It was in Colorado Springs
Okay.
and had pastors coming from all over that are, Christians, Arab Christian
Yep.
congregations, and they told fantastic stories about from where they came from and what was going on.
Okay. Was he the pastor of Casa de Barra, or however you say it, the big church downtown, Brother Andrew? No.
Brother Andrew of Open Doors, and he was
Okay.
speaking at the conference.
Ah, okay.
for it. And Menlo Park put up the money for the International Evangelical Ministers Association, which I met in Cairo.
Okay.
And they brought all these Christian
Okay.
congregations together.
Okay.
in Colorado. So they do come and speak.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't really know this, but I don't know how heavy of an Arabic speaking population we have, but in theory, down the road, you could recruit a church planter from the Synod of the Nile to come here to plant a church or start a service.
Coptic congregation right here in Boise.
Oh, I should go talk to them then.
Well, Ellen Combs and I went.
Oh, okay.
to their place, and they put on a luncheon, and there were, they rent, what is it, St. Stephen's Church, it's right across.
Yeah, from
from
St. Mark's.
St. Mark's,
Yeah,
on Saturdays.
Okay.
They have that's where they have their church service on Saturday.
okay,
And they, of course, not speaking English, so that was
Okay.
very helpful.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I told them you're going to get tired of me saying this, but in many ways, Egypt reminded me a lot of Latin America, like very kid-friendly, kind of like up late partying and going to dinner at midnight. So I lived in Mexico for 2 years with Sarah, so I was kind of used to that. So I just code switched and I was like, I'm a guest, I'm going to just embrace it and have fun. So, yeah.
Do they have air raid shelters there?
I don't know.
I mean, they didn't tell you?
No, they didn't. And but there hasn't been any missiles that have flown to Egypt. In fact, the State Department's been telling Americans to get to Cairo to fly home from there. So,
I know that there's, Capital Christian has a group that was on tour in Israel right now.
oh, okay.
When all this started, and they were trying to raise money for, their people for hotel rooms because it was after the tour was supposed to be.
Okay.
And I talked to Allison about that, and she told me that those countries over there, supposedly, they're supposed to be helping the people, not charging them
Oh, okay.
hotel rooms, I don't know, but they were thinking that they were going to rent a bus and take it down to Cairo.
Okay.
From Israel so that they could fly home from Cairo.
Yeah. I think we missed that by like a week, so that was good. But I never felt unsafe. Like Whitney and I would never go walk the streets of Cairo by myself, but I didn't feel unsafe doing it with a friend. And so we walked around, and I bought a bunch of chocolates for the kids and some bread for Sarah that went bad, unfortunately. I was all excited to bring that home, and it got moldy on the plane ride home. It was really fresh, I'll just put it that way, and got into an argument with a guy trying to buy that. So, yeah, I got the authentic Cairo experience. I just handed him some coins, and I thought that was enough for bread, and he just started screaming at me in Arabic, and I'm like, okay, well, here's some bills, tell me what I owe you, because I want to buy this, and he could have ripped me off, but he didn't, so whatever.
That could happen to you in California.
That is funny. That could happen to you in California.
Well, it happened to me. We had a son-in-law that spent a couple months in Jordan, and he spent most of his time in a bomb shelter.
Oh, okay.
I just wondered, to look at the map, it looks close, maybe it isn't, but.
Yeah, and I think the Egyptian government now is very like pro-America, so I didn't feel like
See,
anybody.
there's always a dud missile that doesn't want to obey the guidance.
Yeah,
And it could get off course.
yeah. Well, there's one thing in Egypt. There's military bases all over the place. So I think they have one of the best militaries in the whole region, if not the best. So, yeah, I felt fine. Whitney would always say to me, if something happens to you or I, our faces are going to be all over CNN and Fox News in the evening. I was like, we'll be fine. So,
Well, that's why outside of all the different churches and the hotels in Cairo right there,
yeah,
when we were there, they had not just one, but 3 or 4 soldiers with the AK-47.
yep.
Making sure that they want to make sure that foreigners are safe.
Yep. Yeah, because they want to protect their tourism industry. I mean, 10,000 people a day go to visit those pyramids. That's a nice chunk of change that they're making, and it's like really, really nice. So
Pay to go see him, or can you just?
we do, or you do, but the Synod of the Nile paid for us, so they paid for everything. We just had to cover airfare.
It gets so close, right?
Yeah. So yep. So I do have to get ready for evening service. So one last question. No. Okay, well, thank you guys for coming tonight. There's sodas and cookies out there if you want to grab one on your way out, so.
Well, I have something that might be of interest too, you can read it, but.
Oh, okay.
I looked up the Jewish population in Egypt, and it's
Yeah.
actually pretty interesting. If you want to take a look at it.
Fewer than 20 individuals.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting, okay. Yeah.
You can look at it, only take a minute, and then if you wanna tell everybody, it's pretty interesting, what's going on there with that.
I don't know. Well, what's interesting is, there's a lot, well, I won't get into the politics of Christians from that region tend to not get along with Jews very well for various reasons.
Israel has an interesting relationship with Christian people too.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a lot of hate going on.
Yeah, and I had a good friend in college who is from Jerusalem, and he did not get along with Jews very well. And anyway, it was just interesting hearing his take versus a more American take. So, yeah.
What's
Go
happening
ahead.
in Egypt, there's only, about 10 years ago, there's only about 20 individuals left. And now they think there's 5 Jewish people left in Egypt, or registered. And there's actually one woman who's officially registered with Egypt as a Jewish person. She's considered the last Jewish person alive
Okay.
in the entire Egypt. So it's pretty crazy that way. That's really wild.
Oh, and another thing I should say, what was interesting about Cairo is the first thing, because, technology is so amazing. I could text Sarah the whole time I was there as long as I had internet. And she's like, well, what are the women like there? And I'm like, it's all over the place in terms of Muslim practice. So there's very progressive types, and then there's the types that are quite conservative and wearing I always forget the term, but you can only see their eyes. They usually weren't Egyptian. They're probably from like the Gulf states. But it's interesting, when I bought chocolate, all the women and the Christians, you can shake their hands, you can hug them. They don't do kissing on the cheek like you do in Mexico, but it's very egalitarian. I would hug women and shake their hands. But I went to go buy chocolates, and I was trying to buy it off of this young Muslim gal, and she wouldn't even look me in the eyes. And that was just kind of jarring for a moment, because I spent pretty much all my time with Christians. But the guys, they were fine. I slipped them a tip, and they treated me like I was a king. So, all right. Well, I do have to get ready for the service. So thank you guys for coming.